It was a late Tuesday night when my phone rang with a dispatch call about a fatal car accident on Highway 325. As I pulled onto the darkened freeway, I felt the weight of the night pressing down on me. When I got to the scene, the harsh lights from my squad car spilled across a grotesque tableau. The driver was slumped over the wheel, his car having swerved off the road directly into a sturdy oak tree. I've seen my share of wrecks, but something about this one crawled under my skin and stayed there. Kneeling beside the car, I checked for a pulse, knowing full well from the silence that engulfed the scene that I wouldn't find one. As protocol dictates, I reached for my digital camera to document the scene. With other units and another fire team on their way, I wanted to ensure I captured every detail. The roads were dry and clear, and as I took pictures of the skid marks streaking across the asphalt, it looked like he'd been trying to dodge something, maybe a deer. Turning to capture images of the wreckage, I froze. About 50 feet away, near the shadowy edge of the forest, stood a figure. It was the man from the car, impossibly standing and watching. I blinked, shaken, then refocused on the car, hesitant to glance back up. When I did, the figure was gone. Chalking it up to a trick of the mind, I completed my documentation and cleared the scene. Later that night, still looped into the eerie silence of Highway 325, dispatch buzzed through my radio once more. A second accident, merely miles from the first. Anxiety pricked at my skin as I approached, again being the first on scene. This time, an older woman lay motionless in her vehicle, her car's crumpled front end wreathed around another tree. As I confirmed her absence of pulse, the stillness of the night fractured, sounds of breaking twigs and ominous growls echoing from the darkness of the woods. Heart hammering, I drew my pistol and pointed it towards the black thicket, the beam of my flashlight penetrating the dense foliage. Something large moved, its presence heavy and menacing. I didn't wait around to meet it. I bolted, not stopping until I was safe within my car. Glancing back, nothing pursued me, but the air remained charged with a palpable terror. Exhausted and rattled, I returned to the station, adrift in doubts about what I'd seen and heard. It wasn't until I reviewed the photos from the first accident scene that cold realization settled in. There, captured plain as day, was the image of the man from the car, standing distantly in the field. And there, even more chilling, was something else. A large, indistinct shadow emerging from the woods. Whatever it was real. And it was terrifying. Now, I carry the weight of these mysteries. The shadow and the figure. Each patrol a reminder of the unknown dangers lurking just beyond the veil of night. I'll never truly know what happened out there, but one thing's for certain. I hope never to encounter it again. It was just like any other day, you know? I was patrolling in this rough part of town, a big place where trouble was never too far away. I guess I was never really bothered by it all, probably since I was fresh out of the military when I joined the police force. I thought I'd seen it all back in my army days, but man, was I wrong. I had no idea what today had in store for me. So, I got this call about a possible break-in at an old, abandoned retirement home. This wasn't my first rodeo with the place. Local kids liked to sneak in there a lot. Figuring it was probably a bunch of teenagers messing around again, I went in with my guard down a little. Big mistake. A stupid one that I'm not used to making. I could hear some noises coming from one of the back rooms as I entered. Instinctively, my hand rested on my pistol. I pushed the door open and drew my gun, only to be greeted by a scene I wasn't expecting. It wasn't mischievous kids this time. It was a small group of tweakers, some of them armed to the teeth. Before I knew it, they started firing. I think I hit one or two, but then I felt a sharp pain in my leg and a couple of thumps on my body armor. One got me in the stomach. I stumbled back into an open room and fell against the wall, trying to catch my breath. The yelling from the other room was a mess as they tried to figure out their next move. Here I was, almost out of bullets because my spare magazine had skittered away down the hallway. To make matters worse, one of their rounds had hit my radio. I couldn't call for backup. I was in deep trouble. Just when I thought it was the end for me, out of the corner of my eye, I saw an unbelievable sight. An old lady in a nightgown. She walked up to the door of the room I was in and slammed it shut, standing there with a smile. As those thugs kept shooting and kicking the door, she didn't move. She just stood there and nothing got through. After what felt like ages but was probably about 10 minutes, the shouting shifted to urgent cries of, "Get on the floor!" And suddenly the noise ceased. I stole a glance down, and when I looked up again, the old lady was gone. The door slowly opened, and a familiar voice asked, "Hey, you okay?" It was one of my buddies from the force. I told him I was hit, and before I knew it, emergency personnel were all over me. I made a full recovery, but what stuck with me was how they knew where to find me. They told me dispatch received a call from an elderly lady saying I was in trouble. Did a ghost just save my hide? I like to think so, 'cause man, there are things out there, some stuff you just can't explain. It was a regular night, just like any other, and my partner and I had just gotten a call about some strange noises coming from an old apartment building. Normally, this wouldn't be a big deal. We respond to hundreds of noise complaints every year, but something about this call was off. The apartment had been abandoned for years, located in a rough part of town. Squatters, we thought. That seemed the simplest explanation. We couldn't have been more wrong, and I was about to find out that this night was going to change my life forever. We arrived at the scene, parked the cruiser, and made our way inside. The stale air inside the building was thick, reeking of decay and damp. We took the stairs, treading carefully to avoid the rubbish and debris littered everywhere. As we reached the 4th floor, we found room 444, with its door slightly ajar. Taking no chances, we drew our flashlights and guns. Peering into the darkness, we pushed the door fully open. The room was empty. No squatters, no critters. Just an empty shell dusted with the neglect years had piled onto it. We stood there for a moment, perplexed, about to chalk it up to a false alarm, when a noise from the hallway spun us around. Flashlights aimed, we caught sight of a man in his late 20s, dressed bizarrely in what looked like a suit from the 1940s. He didn't speak, didn't seem startled, just turned and walked back into room 444. We followed, cautiously inching closer. That's when the music hit us. Big band, swing, something straight out of the 40s. It filled the corridor as if seeping from the very walls. We re-entered room 444, and our jaws dropped. A party was in full swing. Where moments ago there was nothing, now there were people laughing, dancing in vintage dress as if it were indeed the 1940s. The man who had led us back strode over, smiling cryptically. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I need to show you something." Nothing in my years on the force could have prepared me for this. The man gestured toward the floor, where a loose board seemed deliberately placed to draw attention. With wild thoughts racing through my mind, guns, drugs, human remains, I pried it open. Instead of horror, a single letter lay beneath the board addressed to a woman. The music and laughter around us muted as I reached for it. The moment my hand touched the paper, the room emptied. The music stopped, the people vanished. Everyone but my partner and I. We stood there, stunned and silent, then agreed without words that this was our secret. No one would believe this madness. As we left, a photograph on the floor caught my eye. It was of a man in a World War II uniform, looking remarkably similar to our mysterious man in the suit. Driven by a force I can't explain, I visited the address on the letter a few days later. There, in a well-tended garden, was an elderly lady. Heart pounding, I asked for her name. It matched. Handing her the letter, her tears confirmed my fears and wonder. She explained it was from her estranged father, expressing love and apologies. That night and many nights after, as I drove down those familiar roads, the reality of what occurred twisted through my thoughts. I'd made a delivery for a ghost. Did spirits really find ways to reach out from the beyond? I never used to believe in ghosts, but now I do.